who just connected with people in ways that only he could. For instance, if we were in India, he'd say, "Arvind, I must have been an Indian in my previous life." And that's the kind of connection that he'd make to a space and to an individual, me, in ways that only he could.
He was interested in helping people, and I can appreciate that because I share that value with him. His notions about how to use mass media to introduce health practices that would improve conditions for members of a society, I think, were clear-cut attempts to help people live better, to help people live a more satisfactory life.
What comes through to me in all those stories is that he remains to his core a boy who grew up on an Iowa farm, and that he brings that very practical sense and that very genuine sense of who he is. He's a person very well established in his career and very successful in his career. But to talk to him, there's no pretension about him. That he is always, to me, he strikes me as somebody who's always felt privileged to be part of this academic world.
Everett Rogers was known as a warm and generous man, a brilliant scholar, and a gifted teacher. Born in Carroll, Iowa, during the Great Depression, Ev began his formal education in a one-room rural schoolhouse, and he was later active in 4-H and Future Farmers of America. As a young man, he believed he would become a farmer. Like his grandfather, his father, and his uncle.
Early in my life, I thought I would be a farmer. I was sure I would be a farmer. Having grown up on a farm and having a family farm. But then as I went through high school, I began to think more and more about going to college. And going to college meant adding some skills that didn't head me in the direction of farming. And I knew I was looking for a job, a kind of occupation that I would be happy in. My father was more or less forced by his family into being a farmer instead of being in electronics. So I finally found it, teaching. And I've never given up on that sense. And that was 45 or 46 years ago.
Ev Rogers died on October 21st, 2004, after a prolonged battle with cancer. His friends and colleagues remember the great courage, discipline, and dignity he brought to his final days. On October 14th, just days before his death, he met with graduate students in his home for coffee and conversation. As always, their needs and interests were his first concern.
World famous, the most cited communications scholar in the discipline, the super busy, always has something going on, always doing something, and yet if a student asks, can I see you to talk about my thesis, my dissertation, my research ideas, he whips out his appointment book and, I think, okay, maybe he's going to schedule something for 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now. So I'm available tomorrow at 2. Does that work for you? He was always so accessible.
I'd have to say that the 20 years that I knew him, what came through for me as a person who worked with him as a student, as a colleague, as a co-author, as a friend, was his humanity. He was a person who believed in human beings, who nurtured and nourished human beings, who just connected with people in ways that only he could.
Let me tell you a little story about that comes from my part of the world. there's a snake called a puff adder. The puff adder is a very deadly snake. You know, if you get bitten by it, you know, you've got a short little time to think about your life before it's over. Now, the puff adder happens to be the only snake on God's green earth that is born without the ability to swim. All other snakes, if you drop them in water, they can swim, except for the puff adder. And I saw this being done at a snake show in Zimbabwe. If you pick up the puff adder, and you've got to be careful how you do this, and drop it into water, it sinks to the bottom and hopes for the best. It doesn't wriggle. It doesn't look around. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't do anything. Just lies there quietly, hoping for the best, hoping perhaps that the water will evaporate before it drowns, or that the hand of the Lord will reach out from the heaven and get it out before it drowns. None of that happens. It drowns. It just lies there hoping for the best. Now, when it comes to graduate students, to gathering graduate students yourself, most professors sit in their offices like the puff adder, hoping for the best. They hope that students will apply and that they'll get all these applications and they'll sort through them and decide from the bunch of applicants that they've got which are the best ones to keep, you know, by looking at various scores. And then they'll try to keep those. And they're in competition with other universities, and so they don't get the best of them, you know. But they're not out there recruiting the students. Usually they're just waiting for the applications to come in. Then they get what they get. They're hoping for the best, just like the puff adder. Not Ev. Ev didn't work that way. He went out and looked for his students. And he looked for them wherever he could find them, anywhere in the world. He had, when I was there, he had students from about 14 or 15 nations around him all the time. He found the best that he could find wherever they were in the world.
I once overheard a conversation that Ev had with somebody in an event that was held in Phoenix, Arizona, about 2 years ago. This was a session to honor Ev and his contributions to health communication. And somebody asked him a question, Professor Rogers, what's your secret of mentorship? How do you have so many little, I don't know what the term was, Rogers children, or, you know, you're the sort of the mother hen running around. And he paused, and I overheard him. He said, all my life, what I've tried to do is to plant little acorns and watch them grow into trees. And so I think that's what he teaches us about mentorship. I mean, he's a farm boy from Iowa, so it's not uncommon for him to use farm analogies. So I think he was talking about, you know, the planting of a seed, the life cycle that it sort of goes through. And just planting is good, but nourishing the soil, nourishing the seed, you know, weeding it, providing sunlight. Those were the kinds of things that he did and did so well.